Hello and welcome back to the explanatory video of Jane Austen's novel Emma. Going through Jane Austen's different novels, we find that in her novels, she gives her observation of life, observation of people around her, and the description of the society in a delightful and satirical way. Her novels are of domestic type with the things and the people that we see and meet around. When it comes to Jane Austen's novels, studying the character becomes very important because the progress of her story depends mostly upon the characters of her novels. She has a collection of unique and vibrant personalities. The language that she uses in her novels are simple and easily understandable. Her novels are based on wit and folly, love and marriage, virtue and jealousy, and almost every aspect of emotions or psychological insight attached to the novels are based on the characters, the different personalities of the characters. Even here in Emma, we find a collection of vibrant personality. There are numerous characters in Emma, so it can kind of get confusing. I think it will be easily understood when we read the novel or watch the movie. Okay, let's begin. Emma Woodhouse and Isabella Woodhouse are two daughters of Mr. Woodhouse. Emma's sister Isabella was married to John Knightley, and John Knightley had an elder brother who was George Knightley. George Knightley is, of course, the brother-in-law of Emma. And it is said that George Knightley has known Emma ever since she was 12 or 13 years old and has always been like an elder brother, like a guide whenever she made wrong decisions, because our Emma Woodhouse here is a very stubborn, strong-headed kind of woman. In fact, there was nobody else who scolded Emma for making decisions, for making wrong decisions or for making careless decisions. It was only George Knightley who used to scold her and correct her. Emma believed that it was because of her that her governess, Miss Taylor, finally found a husband in Mr. Weston. So now Emma thought that she had skills and talents and the ability of matchmaking, and Emma herself was not interested in marriage. And even her father was happy with her decision that she would always be there with him till his old age. And though she was not interested in finding a husband for herself, she was interested in finding husbands for other people. She thought she was an awesome matchmaker. She wanted to try her talent and skills on her friend, Miss Harriet Smith. Now this character, Miss Harriet Smith, was a poor girl, an illegitimate child who lived in a boarding. Harriet Smith was also romantically linked to someone called Robert Martin. But Emma said no. No, Robert Martin was not a poor man, but Emma felt that Harriet Smith deserves someone who is not a farmer. And Robert Martin may be rich, but he is a farmer. George Knightley advised her that this matchmaking job that she was trying could hurt her friends. It was not right and it could embarrass her friends. She might embarrass Harriet. But Emma, like a typical Jane Austen female protagonist, who is strong-headed and a little stubborn, is full of confidence that she knew what was right. She felt that what she was doing was good for Harriet Smith. Harriet Smith is also a typical Jane Austen's gullible type of girl. Now, Jane Austen has female characters who are very strong-headed and some very gullible and very easily persuaded, and Harriet Smith was this gullible type. She was innocent and very easily persuaded because she trusts people very easily. She trusts Emma's wisdom. She looks up to Emma. And so when Emma told her that Robert Martin was not right for her, she rejected Robert Martin's advances and went on with Emma's decision. Emma had also convinced Harriet that she would be a perfect match with Mr. Elton. Harriet was ready to accept Mr. Elton. But while Emma was trying to convince Mr. Elton to propose Harriet Smith, on the contrary, Elton fell in love with Emma and started to pursue her. Emma was shocked, Harriet was heartbroken, and Elton had to leave the village, the Highbury village. Emma had made her intentions clear to Mr. Elton that she herself was not interested in him and that she was trying to convince him for her friend Harriet Smith. So poor Elton left Highbury village, but found a wife in Mrs. Elton, Mrs. Augusta Elton. Now, yeah, Harriet was also interested in him. She was such a good girl. Elton was also interested in someone like Emma, who was a very smart and good girl, but went on to make one of the worst choices by marrying Augusta Elton, who was snobbish, proud, and always talks about being humble, always thinks that she's the most humble person in the world, while on the contrary, ironically, she was one of the most snobbish and someone who looks down on people and is very talkative and everything that is unpleasant. She has no respect for other people. In short, she is mannerless. And after Mr. and Mrs. Elton gets married, they come back to Highbury village. Meanwhile, a new girl comes to Highbury village. She is Jane Fairfax, a very pretty girl, but poor and orphan. Since her parents have died, she had come to live with her aunt and grandmother. And since she was very pretty, when she came to Highbury village, some anonymous person, someone unknown to people, secretly presented her a grand piano. Rumors started spreading that the person who gifted Jane Fairfax a grand piano must be the handsome George Knightley. And there were also rumors that maybe George Knightley was interested in Jane Fairfax. But our matchmaker Emma dismissed such rumors, saying that that can't be true. Now in Emma's heart, she wanted Mr. George Knightley not to get married and have children, so that her sister Isabella Knightley's children would inherit the Donwell Abbey estate. Because Isabella's husband was the younger brother of George Knightley, for some time, Emma was infatuated by Mr. Frank Churchill, but then she realized her plan that she did not want to marry. Emma wanted to pay a visit to Mr. and Mrs. Elton, and she called Harriet Smith to come with her. You remember Harriet Smith, the girl with whom Emma wanted to match Elton? I really don't think that was a good idea because, you know, now Elton is married to Mrs. Elton, and then it would be embarrassing for Harriet Smith to go there and meet them. But as gullible as Harriet Smith was, she went with Emma. Harriet is such a pathetic character. Even at a ball in Crown Inn, every unmarried girl was dancing except Harriet. Every eligible bachelor was, inviting the girls to dance, but no one invited Harriet. When Emma saw this, that Harriet was the only unmarried girl who was not dancing, she felt sorry for Harriet and asked Mr. Elton to ask Harriet to dance. But Mr. Elton refused. In such a sorry case, George Knightley stepped in and invited Harriet to dance. Emma was happy and also realized what a good dancer George Knightley was. Even in another situation, in an important incident, it so happened that when Harriet was alone outside, there were some gypsy beggars, some beggars who came and were disturbing Harriet in the dark when she was all alone, maybe trying to steal her, trying to rob from her, or be violent with her. At such an unfortunate incident, Frank Churchill helps Harriet and saves her. Now this makes Emma wonder what a nice pair Harriet and Frank Churchill would make. Mr. George Knightley arranges a party-like social gathering at his luxurious estate, the Donwell Abbey, which Emma wanted to give to her sister's children. It was called the Strawberry Party in June, but in that party, Jane Fairfax appears to be a little worried. Now, Jane Fairfax is such a character that she is pretty, but never quite happy with herself, never quite happy because she's an orphan, like an outcast, living with grandmother and aunt, and having no one to trust. So Jane Fairfax was there, but leaves early. The next day, people went out to explore the Box Hill, like an excursion, like going out to explore a hill. And throughout the day, Frank Churchill was seen flirting with Emma, throughout the exploration, like usual, Jane Fairfax appeared bothered, worried, not very in the happy mood. And in their conversation, Emma makes fun of Miss Bates. Emma is such a character that she's not perfectly good. She has her own humanly defects that makes her real. So while talking, she makes fun of Mrs. Bates, maybe an insulting remark about Miss Bates. And of course, George Knightley overheard it and scolded her for making such a remark. On being scolded for making fun of Miss Bates, Emma felt sorry and she cried. And the next day, she went personally to apologize to Miss Bates. There, she did not see Jane and was told that Jane was not feeling well. She also got the information that Mrs. Elton has been constantly telling Miss Jane Fairfax to come and be her governess, to work in her place. And Jane did not naturally want to go and work there as a governess, but situation compelled her to accept that proposal. Emma felt sorry that Jane had to take up such a position. Later, Emma learns that Jane Fairfax and Frank Churchill were engaged this whole time, and the grand piano that Jane Fairfax received was from none other than Frank Churchill. And Frank Churchill also apologized in a letter to Emma, saying that to hide the real situation, I had to flirt with you, but I hope you don't mind. Frank Churchill felt that Emma was the only strong-headed one who will be able to help him to hide the real situation of his engagement. She also learns that Harriet had been thinking of George Knightley. Now, this poor Harriet, one man after the other, now she was falling in love with George Knightley. She was interested in George Knightley. But Emma realized that this cannot be a good connection, because if George Knightley married Harriet and had children, then those children will be the owner of Donwell Abbey and not her sister Isabella's children. So she was worried. George Knightley, however, told Emma that he was not interested in Harriet but in Emma. Emma was also interested in George Knightley and accepted George Knightley's proposal, because only if she married George Knightley, then those possessions will go to Isabella's children. Emma thinks a lot. But then again, she was worried about Harriet's position, because Harriet just told Emma that she liked Mr. Knightley, Mr. George Knightley. She felt that, oh, poor Harriet, she'll have to face another embarrassment in life. One man after another, and just because Emma told her that she was not a good match with Robert Martin. But luckily, Harriet was out of the village and went to visit Emma's sister Isabella and her husband George Knightley in London. And only good for her, because there she finally realized that after all this fuss, after all this confusion, her true love was none other than Robert Martin, the first love himself. So now Robert Martin and Harriet were in love, they were a couple, and Emma can freely and happily marry George Knightley. Well, almost freely, because her father, Mr. Woodhouse, was not happy with Emma's decision to get married. He always thought that Emma would not marry and would be there for him till his old age, till his death. But now Emma was deciding to get married and he would be left all alone. It is a little selfish on the part of Mr. Woodhouse, but yeah, there it is. But then again, he too was happy, because Mr. George Knightley decided that instead of taking Emma to his place, he would come and live with Emma's father and Emma in their house. Thus the novel ends with Emma's governess Miss Taylor married to Mr. Weston, Elton marrying Augusta Elton, Frank Churchill and Jane Fairfax getting married, Harriet Smith and Robert Martin rekindling their romance, and Emma marrying George Knightley. Taking a brief look at the characters here, Emma Woodhouse is an imaginative and self-deceived character who thinks that she can be a good matchmaker. She is such a strong-headed woman who uses her head to decide things instead of using her heart and falling for the decisions of her heart. As you can see, she decides matchmaking not because of love and romantic reasons, but because of, looking at their background, looking at their personality, looking at their ideas, she decides using the head for herself and as well as for others, because she thinks a lot about Isabella's children, her sister's children, and about her father's well-being. And her idea about marriage is all about using the head to make connections, because she getting married to George Knightley is not much of a romantic issue, but only because she can give the possession to her sister's children. She's not selfish. We cannot call her selfish, because all the things that she does, all the things that she says, she's always thinking about the well-being of other people. She is self-deceived because she thinks she knows everybody very well. She thinks that she is the only one who can decide what is best for others. George Knightley is said to be a man of like 37 or 38. His personality is quite admirable, very calm and very rational, and he is the only one who can scold Emma for making irrational decisions. He's like a friend and a guide and an elderly brother to Emma. If it were not for George Knightley, Emma would have committed a lot of mistakes because of her self-deception and self-confidence. Harriet Smith is a friend of Emma. She is an illegitimate child, a 17-year-old girl who Emma tries to marry off to Mr. Elton and Frank Churchill. But in the end, Harriet finds love in her own choice, that is Robert Martin, and not Emma's choice. There are, of course, other minor and major characters, but the most important characters are those. So this is a short summary and story of Emma by Jane Austen. I hope it will be helpful. I'll see you in the next video. Thank you.